Hello, everyone. Just seeing if anyone was around to go over a cold case, perhaps. So I will give it a few minutes to see if anyone pops in. My jug is boiling, if you can hear it in the background. Always got to have a coffee prepared and ready to go. So we're just going to, like I say, wait a few minutes, see if anyone pops in or doesn't, for that matter, either. If they don't, then I will just delete this live and try again in the morning when I do have another one already booked. Hi, Coffee Chats and Walks. How are you? Welcome to New Zealand Mysteries. Kiwi, hi, sweetheart. How are you? So I thought I might see who's around and go over one of my cases that I've previously done. And yeah. So we'll wait for a couple more people to come in. I'll just go turn off the TV and pour my coffee. One moment, guys. Yeah, I am doing well. I was watching TV. Well, I watched Married at First Sight, as you do. And then I went back onto YouTube. And I couldn't really find bugger all that I just felt like watching. So I thought I will pop on here and see who's about on the YouTube streets and see who wants to watch a video with me. I'm just going through. Okay, well, I do have one here. It's going to be a trigger warning because it deals with unaliving. It's about a missing young man from New Zealand, and we don't always do New Zealand cases. We do those from around the world as well. So a couple of things. It's going to be another one of those silly ones where I look stupid with my wig and sunglasses on, because that's how I rolled in the beginning. Can you hear my fan going? Let me know if you can hear my fan going, because I don't want that to annoy you. Yeah, so I look ridiculous. I've got my great, awesome wig. I should have just pretended and kept just thinking it was a wig and just didn't know any better. But let's get into it. It's a long one. It's about an hour, so I'm going to stop every 10, 15 minutes to say hello to people, check yous are all doing okay and stuff like that. So let's okay. If it does become a problem, just let me know, because I know it can be annoying. Hello, everyone. The sound does get better in a couple of minutes. Nice to see you, Coffee Chats and Walks. Thanks for being here.
Thank you to the subscribers that keep coming back. You blow my mind. I'm so appreciative of you guys. If you're new around here, give us a chance. You might hear a case that you haven't heard before. Just quickly before I get into this case, I've had a couple of comments about the quality of my videos and my editing and stuff like that. So I'm just a poor bloody student, but I do spend
You might have to turn it up a little bit, guys.
On my channel and on my Facebook page, keeping stories alive. I can't afford to get anyone to edit or help me with recordings. I'm not good at it, I know that, but the important thing for me is that I'm keeping these cases alive, and I'm giving chances for people to see these cases, maybe for the family to find answers. That's all.
I look like such an egg
to me.
Div.
So I'm sorry, but 'tis the way it is. Let's move on. to the case.
Just a little warning that this video does contain and we discuss mental health issues. If this is a problem for you, please don't watch the video. If it triggers anything, I have helplines in the description box below, so please use them. This case is about Quentin Godwin. Where is Quentin? Is he still alive? It's about his mother not giving up on him, and it's about the Missing People Choir, who you may not have heard of. So, going to be interesting. So, from Wikipedia here, if we take a look at Wikipedia, it is Titirangi is where this case takes place. Titirangi is a suburb in the Waitakere ward of the city of Auckland in northern New Zealand. It is an affluent residential suburb located 13 kilometres, which is about 8 miles, to the southwest of the Auckland city centre at the southern end of the Waitakere Ranges. In the Māori language, Titirangi means long streaks of cloud in the sky, but this is often given as fringe of heaven. That's so beautiful. So we'll look at a map here, and this is Auckland. Hopefully you can see it. And if we zoom in, not out, which I always do, this is where Titirangi is located. So this article first is from stuff.co.nz. It's an interactive and it is absolutely amazing. The information in it is amazing. So we're going to go with that. What happened to Q? And the mystery of what happened to teenager Quentin, Q as he likes to be called, Godwin, has become more baffling as time has gone on. The teenager left his West Auckland home for work in 1992, then vanished. Self-harm or misadventure has longly seemed the most likely explanation, but new information suggests something more sinister. So this is Kelly Dennett and David White who made this, so big shout out to them. Beautiful family. The time when Sarah Godwin's world spun off its axis started with a note. That May of 1992, her son Quentin left his bush-flanked home and never returned. That his remains, at the very least, have never been found has confused and frustrated his family, particularly Sarah, who never given up hope of finding her son. For decades, the family of 8 has lived not knowing what happened to Quentin, known to all as just Q, who was due to start work at his local supermarket that night, but never arrived. Godwin's search has reached its 28-year anniversary, and I think this is, I couldn't find a date, but I'm pretty sure it's 2017 that this was released. Oh no, up in 1992. Sorry, I can't find a date when it's released. That's all right. That's an awful long time not to know what happened to your son, she says. I've worked constantly to try and find out what might have happened to him. I'm absolutely tenacious about getting to the bottom of this because I feel there are people in New Zealand who know what happened to Q. Q was 18 and living near the small village of Titirangi in West Auckland. The middle child in a large blended family, Q was in his final year of high school at Linfield College. After a break to study forestry in Rotorua, he was curious and fun, raised in a happy, active home. Their backyard was the sprawling Waitakere Ranges. Q's birth father lived at Albany Centrepoint, and Q was raised by his mother and stepfather, Steve, from about the age of 4. His relationship with his birth father was a bit thorny. While Q adored his family and was particularly close to his mum, he suffered from self-doubt. He had bipolar disorder and smoked Mary J. His moods were up and down, and while he was social and had a lot of friends, they noted he appeared troubled sometimes. Sometimes strange. He'd received outpatient treatment for manic episodes. Just a brief reminder that every person deserves to have their story told, no matter what they did or what matter they're into. And if you comment below anything nasty or victim shame or blame, I will remove it straight away. Please keep the comments nice and kind because you just don't know what family members might be reading them. So let's keep going.
Q was burdened. A drink driving incident on his birthday the year before saw him crash and injure a former flatmate. They fell out and Q was charged, but failed to show for court. A warrant was issued for his arrest. While self-harm or misadventure have long been the prevailing theories about what happened to Q, in 2014, 3 women alleged a former school friend had confessed to being in a car that had struck and killed him. The men were said to have panicked and buried him. Stuff has investigated this scenario and examined other theories put forward by police. That he suffered an accident or became lost, that he started a new life, or that he died by S.
So this is interesting. They've got a few different people coming forward saying that they know that he was hit and killed by someone and was buried. But we'll go on a bit further to listen some more.
Which is plausible, but uncertainty reigns. Last scene. Steve recalls one of his last conversations with Q was in the days before his disappearance. It was a bit grey and overcast, and I really remember sitting down with Q on the sofa, he said. He was searching really for who he was, how he was going forward, and what he was going to do. And afterwards, I thought, because Q hadn't been easy and he was really considering his path as a young man, it was a really nice talk. A little bit of the timeline. On May the 20th, 92, Q went to school as normal at Linfield College. At 2:30 p.m, a friend of the family saw him walking along nearby Boylan Road. Expressionless was what they suggested. She greeted him, but he said nothing. Half an hour later, Q phoned a friend who said Q seemed reasonably normal. So you get a couple of different stories, and you really can't say what Q was feeling, really. The alarm wasn't raised until the following morning when his sister went to get him up for school and discovered his sleeper empty, and a lengthy note was in there. Q had written that he had, quote, made up my mind to rid myself of this world, I should say. He said he'd, quote, failed to be able to fit in with the rest of this society. It ain't easy being a misfit, and after a while you just withdraw into a recluse incapable of functioning normally. It seems that no matter how hard I try to trust myself and trust others, I just don't cope.
Hey, Pam.
Q made a point of saying that Mary J and Magic Mushies had, quote, sapped my brain and body. He was, quote, not normal anymore. A fear is what governs me. Okay, so that's quite a worrying note, and I can see why some people would jump to the S theory quickly after their note, but it didn't exactly say that he was going to do anything. I don't know, that's weird. Let's have a look into it. Theory 1 is the S theory. The note was the strongest clue the family had about Q's disappearance, but then and now, aspects of this theory trouble them. Neither Edwards nor Godwin, his mum or stepdad, or his stepbrother Chris instinctively believe he could have. Chris thinks Q was scared of sharks in the water. Well, it was the first time Q had completely disappeared. Just 5 days earlier, he had left a similar note found by his brother, but he returned home, reporting to the driver who ferried him from Piha that he intended to jump off Lion Rock but had chickened out. Certainly gives more reason to think that this may be the answer. Edwards took Q's disappearance seriously, quickly reporting it to police. Edwards says the police were good and the community quickly began searching. They focused on the Waitakere coastline after those reports of Q heading towards Piha. And I've done a video on Piha and the many people that have gone missing in that area. Ilwa Roland, the French student, and a couple of girls have got missing in that area. Very, very strange. But there were multiple possible sightings of Q, even after the time he had reportedly hitchhiked to Piha. At 12:30 p.m. on May 21st, a local saw a man of Q's description with a, quote, slightly pleading face. I'm not quite sure what a pleading face looks like, so that's interesting. And that was on Scenic Drive, 12 kilometres from his home. Another witness, Miss Reed, said she was, quote, 95% sure she saw Q walking along Huia Road toward Woodland Park that same night at 11 p.m. She said he looked depressed. Also, again, how can you tell someone's depressed? Yeah, I don't know. Edwards is emotional, recalling the realization he had to tell Sarah that Q was missing. She was in England visiting her parents. He'd put the overseas call off and...
Well, we all know what we mean. Mum, mama, mummy. Oh, it's all the same lovely person. And so, yeah, we've got a couple of theories going at the moment. So we've got the whole unaliving himself theory, and we've heard a few things to align with that. And then as we move into it, we're going to hear a few things from these witnesses as well. So, yeah, a couple of things could be going on. Nevertheless, he's still missing, of course.
On the instinct that Q would turn up, and I can understand, waiting a bit, thinking, oh no, it's going to be all right, it's going to be all right. He said, I had a strong feeling, actually, that Q didn't have it in him to top himself. He said, I thought Q's life force was very strong, and I didn't think he would do that. I think because of his depression that he would contemplate it, but knowing the boy, I don't think he could have done it. So I had great confidence that we would find him. We were looking and looking hard. Unbeknown to the family at the time, a counsellor at Q's previous school, Green Bay High, said they'd had a conversation with Q years before his disappearance, where Q had said he would S in circumstances where he couldn't be stopped or his body found, a plan that didn't involve the sea. The council believed it wasn't an immediate one. They didn't report it to the police until many years later, and Sarah only learned of it from the coronial inquest. So some more things pointing to that theory, and even though he'd mentioned it years and years before, doesn't mean that he was thinking it at that time, but it certainly looks worse for this theory. If he had died at Piha, would his body have washed up? And we touched on this earlier. So many people have gone missing in Piha and haven't been found. So many people have died at Piha in the water and their bodies have washed up. So, I don't know. University of Auckland academic Dr. Jonathan Webber is in the middle of a study that could answer this. There are a few studies on how long it takes for bodies to wash up. Many have been carried out overseas in different environments. Webber is analysing about 250 New Zealand drownings to find average timings, taking into consideration ethnicity, weight, and gender. Webber is a lifeguard and a long-time Piha resident, and he and others named the drowning of Warriors player Sunny Fay at Bethells Beach in 2009 as an instance where a person could drown and their body not be recovered. In Fay's case, he was known to have been swimming, so that his remains were never found is less of a mystery. He says it's harder for people to intentionally drown themselves from the beach. They have tricky surf conditions to contend with, and people's survival instinct kicks in. So those who jump off a high point are likely to suffer severe injuries, possibly making it harder to recover them. Bodies that go missing in the surf at West Coast beaches tend to travel north. Webber's study findings are months away, but anecdotally, he said, I can say with 30 years experience, if someone drowned at Piha right now, I'd expect them to be found somewhere north, Bethells, or towards the Kaipara Harbour within the next 3 to 10 days. So that's interesting to hear what he thinks and how he thinks people would survive or whether bodies would be found.
Isn't that Piha just beautiful though? That Stranda Beach. It's just for the amount of people that have gone missing there. It's a beautiful piece of land. And Pam and Deb, I wanted to ask, what on earth the time is where you guys are? And you must be really tired.
This interactive thing is amazing. They've done such an amazing job. Theories 2 and 3. Voluntary disappearance, maybe misadventure. Q loved the outdoors and was comfortable in it, but his backyard, the Waitakere Ranges, are immense even for the seasoned tramper. Spanning 28,000 hectares of bush, it's a hiker's paradise, and Q and his family regularly went walking there. By May of 92, Q wasn't driving, and instead he hitchhiked, walked, or cycled. His mum and stepfather's initial instinct was that Q had taken some time out to get his head together. He was known for taking flight when he was on a high. While the various possible sightings of Q in and around the bush in the 48 hours after he was last seen supported the possibility, credible sightings after this time dried up. A series of strange phone calls, though, in the years afterward raised hope. In October 93, a woman calling herself Marissa, claiming to be Q's wife, made contact, purportedly, which is a funny word I've never heard before, from a phone box in Invercargill. She relayed they had a 1-year-old child named Jackie Elizabeth Godwin. Police traced the call to the Auckland City Council Library on Grays Avenue. Their checks with social services found nobody called Jackie or Marissa Godwin. Who on earth does this to a grieving family? What messed up mind would you have to do this to a grieving family? It's just absolutely horrible. In 1995, another call was made from Wiri, a South Auckland address, from a woman claiming to be Q's wife. Both women said Q didn't want to make contact but they felt his family should know. Godwin treated them with some credibility. Little did the callers know that 2 weeks before his disappearance, Q told a friend he had got someone pregnant. His family didn't hear about this until much later. They have no idea who Q might have been referring to. Police traced the last call, but the home's occupants denied it. The police said, well, it's impossible that it didn't come from this house. We could take them to court for misuse of a telephone or let it go. So what do I do with that, Sarah said. The caller sounded Kiwi, young, fairly genuine. It's always been on my mind. If it wasn't a genuine call, why would somebody do something like that? She wasn't asking for money. So it appears there's no motive or no monetary motive for people to do that. So what sick satisfaction do they get out of that if it's a hoax and not true? With posters across the country with their number, the family were targets. One boy even phoned pretending to be Q.
I don't understand. And you hear it happen in cases from all around the world, but I just don't understand how people can mess with the heads of families that are going through the most weirdest, worst, horriblest time of their whole entire lives, and people think it's okay to ring them and play pranks on them and shit like that. I'm never going to understand that. Never. I don't care who you are. I just never understand that. Hey, TN Chaser, welcome. Yeah, they are.
Disgusting, New Zealanders. Disgusting. If Q is alive today, he would be 46. But if he had disappeared voluntarily, he would have had a tough time starting over. His bank account hasn't been touched, and he hasn't left the country under his own name. And would he have the know-how to leave the country under his own name? Would he have the know-how at 18 to start a new life without using his bank account and ID and so forth? Q wasn't the sort of person who was away from his family. He didn't hate us. We didn't have any rows. He was very reliant on me in particular, from his mum. Well, it's possible he had an accident or became disoriented in the bush and died. That his body has never been found has long been a sticking point. Sir Bob Harvey is adamant people just don't vanish. The 79-year-old was elected mayor of the former Waitakere City Council a few months after Q left home for the last time. The former lifeguard often took part in searches for missing people. He recalls one man's skeleton was found in the Waitakeres 3 decades after he was last seen, but thinks it's rare for people to be lost forever. Search and rescue is very sophisticated. We're not talking about 1930s New Zealand, Harvey said. It's rare for bodies to go undiscovered because there's a lot of trampers, walkers, hikers. It's a city of 1 million people. There are trails. But, I disagree because on this channel, we've had a lot of people go missing and nothing is ever found, even after decades. Other experts say it's unusual but not improbable for a body to be irrecoverable. One experienced search and rescuer says not to underestimate how much of the bush is untracked. There's huge areas where you'd never go to. If somebody did for whatever reason, it's quite feasible they would never be discovered. You could be 100 metres from the road in the bush and not be found simply because somebody would never walk there. And I definitely actually agree with that statement for sure. So let's look at theory 4, foul play. There is a final possibility. In 2014, an inquest into Q's disappearance went ahead before coroner Deborah Marshall, despite Sarah's disapproval, and we might cover the coroner's inquest in another article. The inquest publicity brought forward an anonymous tipster who, mid-hearing, told police a friend had confessed to her family years earlier that Q had been accidentally struck by a car and then buried by 4 men at Langholm Beach. There is confusion around the location of the alleged collision, with both the beach and the lower Nehutupu Dam named as the location. The sites are close, though, about 4 kilometres, a couple minutes drive apart. The latter was a popular area for drinkers and drivers to congregate. So I've actually never heard of these places. So that's his address, and they're definitely around that area. Godwin, his mum, says police were tight-lipped about the information and didn't appear to be giving it any credence. In 2015, one of the women who claimed to have heard the confession made contact with Sarah directly. The woman, who was fearful for her safety and didn't want to be identified, no longer lives in New Zealand, but grew up in West Auckland and went to school with Q. She remembers him fondly and was aware of his disappearance, which is why, when another school friend came to her home to have coffee with her mother and her sister, she says she was shocked to hear him saying he knew something about Q's disappearance. In a later statement to police, she alleges the man told her he had, quote, a secret. They were doing burnouts, and then from out of nowhere, Quentin just jumped out in front of the car and they hit him. So this is obviously the place, and you can see the evidence of hoons, I should say, hoons and burnouts and such. They said they killed him, and they then decided they thought they'd get in trouble for doing it, and even though they said he jumped in front of the car, they decided to bury him. And I can't remember exactly word for word, but for some reason he said it was light bush, whether that be left or right.
So that kind of sounds feasible, doesn't it? They've even showed you the place where these kids were supposedly doing the burnouts, and they've showed you the marks where the kids were supposedly doing the burnouts. And they're saying that somebody accidentally hit him in the middle of this. And it doesn't sound like it's just made up shit. I don't think anyway. Yeah. It got me here, Pam. That's what counts. Absolutely right.
But they dragged him off to the side of the beach where there was light, shrub, and buried him, and that was it. She told police she interpreted the tale as a, quote, cry for help. She said, I asked him why you hadn't said something about this, and the bro code was sort of the answer. We were just a bit dumbfounded, to be honest, and yeah, quite upset us. The women were rattled, and seeing the publicity about the inquest, decided to come forward. Identities of the men, all around the same age as Q at the time, have been provided to staff. One was known in the community at the time and is understood to be a senior member of a gang. Another is in custody awaiting trial for domestic violence matter, which was due to be heard when the pandemic lockdowns began. Staff has been unable to speak to him because of this, and a third man is untraceable.
The fourth man lives in West Auckland and was a former friend of Q's. The man, whose staff can't name for legal reasons, is eager to talk, and he's also quick to dispel the claim that he has anything to do with his former friend's disappearance. Now in his 40s, he says he's a full-time caregiver for his children. He admits to being a ratbag in his youth, like I guess all of us have been, and early adult years, but reckons he's turned his life around. He said he and Q used to drink and chase after girls. They spent time at Langholm Beach and the lower Nihutupu Dam. They were close enough that he recalls being invited to Q's home, though Sarah doesn't remember meeting him, which is not odd. I mean, when my boys were growing up, there were so many in and out of the house, I couldn't tell you half of them. The first he heard of claims of an accident was when a friend, one of the men named as being in the car with him, was interviewed by police. He said apparently someone rang in and made a ridiculous, absurd statement. I can't think who would have it in for us. He was expecting to be questioned, but police never contacted him and he never volunteered. He's horrified that Q's family think he was involved. So it's a bit of a worry that we're hearing the police didn't follow up on this theory. It's the job of police, I think, to be open-minded to any theory or any evidence and to investigate, That's what police do, but maybe not. This guy said, I understand what it's like to have kids and you love your kids. Now, I can't think of anything worse than one of your children dying before you. There is one thing worse, and that's not knowing. That would eat me up, and if I had a part in his disappearance, I obviously would have got some way to tell them I would do that. He says, as I'm getting older, things like that are really important to me. Your word is your honour. I try and be like that because it's monkey see, monkey do with the kids. I feel very strongly about things like that. I just can't imagine what his mum must be going through, They say time heals, but no way, that would be so horrible. So he's a good person now. Was he a good person back then? And what happens when good people accidentally hit someone and freak out and panic? Just saying. He said prior to Q's disappearance, they had drifted apart, describing Q's mental health issues and didn't find out sometime later that he was missing. He had his own theories about what happened to Q. Beautiful pictures. He said Quentin had pictures of Mary J out in the bush in the Waitakaris. This is just pure assumption, but our two best guesses was that somebody had stumbled across his plantation or he stumbled across someone else's.
Running late.
Putting in another theory. He disputes that he's ever made a confession and that any suggestion he was a misunderstanding. That he was simply recounting rumours that had circulated in the community. He asked staff to put him in touch with Q's family so he could reassure them himself. He said, you have my word, I had nothing to do with it. After several false starts, his stepdad was eventually able to meet him, but rather than finding closure, he came away exasperated. He said, quote, he couldn't understand how the information is out there. I think he's lying. The man said he would provide documentation that would show that when Q went missing, he was either on remand in Mount Eden prison or in drug rehab. He hasn't furnished that. Whether he invented the whole story from the start, that's anybody's guess. It's a strange position to put yourself in. Despite saying he'd never been interviewed by police, an email shows the former officer in charge of the case, Detective Senior Sergeant Steve Sultan, say that 10 times fast, telling Sarah Godwin's UK police liaison that 3 of the men named as being in the vehicle were spoken to. She believes police have interviewed the wrong man. There is a man with the same name and of similar age whose stuff has identified in prison. Godwin's compiled a lengthy document of why she believes this, but police declined to discuss it. How frustrating for this poor family. There's just so much going on. Emails show during the course of his investigation, Sultan visited Langholm Beach, but concluded if a body had been buried there, it would have been discovered due to the construction of several homes in the intervening decades. Writing to the mum's liaison, he notes a thorough search would require felling trees and excavation, which they weren't willing to do without a specific burial site. In another email, Sultan appears to give the story of a confession credence, noting the initial informant, quote, did not see the incident happen. She was only told about it. Waitemata Police Detective Inspector John Sutton declined an interview and refused to comment on particular parts of the investigation. He said police had investigated considerably, including an extensive search of Huia by search and rescue. Whew, stuff going on. 28 years is a long time for any family to be waiting for answers about a loved one, and our hearts go out to them. Anyone with information about Quinton's disappearance can contact police, and I will have that information on screen shortly. Sarah Godwin is disappointed police inquiries haven't uncovered anything new. She finds the claims of a confession to be credible. Given Q was known to frequent the dam and often being on foot, the scenario is plausible to her. It would explain why Q's body has never been found. She's
Kia ora, Phoebe. Good to see you.
had much contact with the woman who Stuff spoke to. For me, it's just good to know if the story is true, and if it's not true, why did he tell it? This poor family, just so many stories and so many theories, and no one knows who's credible and who's lying. Oh, it must be awful. In declaring Q deceased in 2014, Coroner Marshall considered there was not enough evidence to say what had happened, unless new evidence emerged and that Q was presumed lost or irrecoverable. His mum, Sarah, has spoken very eloquently in the media about the heartbreak that results when a child is missing. The uncertainty is devastating. Sarah has never given up on the search for her son, and although this finding will be unwelcome to her, I have no doubt she will continue her search. I wish Quinton's family well, said Coroner Marshall. Hope. When the stakes are high, you'll do anything. In the days after Q went missing, a desperate mum and stepfather enlisted the help of a local water diviner who claimed he could find Q. We've talked about diviners in another video, but diviners are those guys that have the sticks, and when they walk over places and there's something underneath the ground, then the sticks like move together or something like that. You can call it grasping at straws, but it seemed like such a real thing. His stepfather said, I went well prepared. I went with a whole bunch of maps, a big map of New Zealand, and said, okay, let's track him down. As the water diviner went on, the maps got smaller and smaller with more granular detail, houses and tracks, until they appeared to be following Quinton all the way up to Opua in the Bay of Islands, where he would go and then stop. It was like he was hitchhiking, Edward said. The diviner purported to track Q up to Russell, then Long Bay, and over to the other side of the peninsula. The peninsula, where Q had a great aunt. Opua is a long way, very long way. So we thought, oh, he's gone to check in with her. It was just the sort of thing he could have done, he said. Stepfather left Titirangi at 4 a.m. the next day at breakneck speed in my old sub. I'd phoned the old aunt and got the name of the farmer at the end of the road. I phoned the farmer and said, look at this situation. We think there's a young man who's on your land. And the farmer said, no problem. There will be a 4-wheel drive motorcycle. I will have the keys in it. You just come straight there. Really good. That's so nice. Edward says, I was on that motorcycle all over the farm chasing bloody rainbows. He ended the day in the lounge of the Duke of Marlborough Hotel next to the fire. He said, I went and bought myself a big whiskey. There were 2 sofas there, one couple on one and me on the other, and the TV was on. And I said to them, do you mind if I turn that off? I've had a hard day. They said, no problem. They were American, and they said, why have you had such a hard day? And I said, well, here's the story for you. And I just dumped it on them. And they just sat there and listened to me. And they said, well, that's an amazing story. Now listen to this one. And they said, 5 years ago, our son vanished. And they said they'd given up. One night they went to investigate a noise in their driveway. They said and it was their son, a sort of skeleton, he was alive, but he was a shadow of the boy that we knew. He'd been living in a cardboard box behind the hills of San Francisco on his own, miles away. He'd finally came back after all that time and crawled into the boat where they found him. Wow, it just blew me away. It was like, all of a sudden that hope came back. So this couple's son went missing, but they found him again many, many years later. He had been depressed and he had gone to become a social worker and got quite a good degree and helped all sorts of young people. And he was just a fine young chap. And they were very proud of him. How would you feel? I just remember being totally knocked over by that. Wow, what a coincidence that he meets these people who have been through something similar on that horrible day for him. And they give him a bit of hope with their story. He said, it just gave me hope, real hope. These things happen, something like that. It was a sign. Anything could happen now. Godwin maintained her search for her son, even from a distance. A few years after Q's disappearance, she relocated to the UK. She has maintained contact with Waitemata Police, who hold the open case file and was her own liaison officer in the UK. She started a website, Q is Missing, and is a member of the charity Missing People. In 2011, she spoke to Britain's Parliament about the horrors families of missing people endure. In 2017, she joined a television special of Britain's Got Talent as part of the Missing People Choir and sang I Miss You to an audience and judges, including Simon Cowell. And we're going to have a bit of a look at this Missing Persons Choir or Missing People's Choir and what happened on that program shortly. Every so often, she reminds Te Turangi's Facebook community that Q is still missing. She regularly rallied media. She said it feels pretty horrible the way it is. All I want to do is find out the answers, find his remains, and have some answers to our questions. It's not just me, it's our family. She says, please, if you can help us, we're not looking for revenge. We just want answers. So there's some information here about where you can ring the Waitemata Police 09839 0600. You can email Sarah at qismissing.com, and there's also places here where you can get help if you have mental health issues or if this is a trigger. All this information will be in the description box below.
Wow. So what an interesting story. One thing that I keep coming back to is those stories or pranks, if they're pranks or whatever, those stories, they sound really plausible, right? And they sound like it's a story that could have actually happened very easily. Up doing burnouts and someone swings the tail of the car out and hits them. They all freak out and decide to just get rid of him. I don't see why that couldn't happen. I mean, they've found no evidence of where his body is or anything like that to say what has happened. So why couldn't it be, right? But the stories seem really detailed as well. But they didn't. Either the cops just didn't investigate properly at the time, and it looks like the family asked them to investigate again, but they didn't do a lot. And yeah, Kiwi, why would they make it up? And these are people that, some people that seem of good reputations. So yeah, why would they make that up? And why would so many different people make the same shit up? I don't know. Seems a bit sus to me, but until this day, there's no sign of him. For a small country of 5 million, we sure do have a lot that seem to go missing, sadly. And, I've always said that unsolved murders are horrible, missing people are horrible, but getting the body back to put someone to rest with the dignity and respect they deserve and have them buried somewhere where the family can go and spend time with them and remember them is so huge that when you do have these missing persons where there's no body, I think it hurts just that much more. And I think that's why missing persons always got to me, I guess. So how are you guys going? You want to watch another case? Or have I bored you to death enough that you need to go to sleep now? That's what I'm trying to do to myself, bore myself to sleep. You should look that up. Disappearance of Michael Donaghy. All right, give me a moment. I will have a look. Michael Donaghy. Missing Michael Donaghy. Okay. Oh, we've actually even got a Wikipedia thing, so hang on. It would be good to have information on the investigation, but in New Zealand, they just don't share a lot of that shit, so. But yeah, it would. Okay, let's have a look at this then. This is one Phoebe just said. Michael Wayne Donaghy, May 12th, 1986, disappeared March 24th, 1991, is a Canadian missing child who disappeared from the playground at Blanchard Park Elementary School in Victoria, British Columbia in 1991 and has never been found or seen since. Michael was last seen that day around 12:30 p.m. at the playground as his mother, Crystal, was participating in a women's football practice where his father was a spectator. So, although he disappeared meters from his parents, no witnesses to his disappearance have ever been identified. Wow. So right under the noses of mum and dad. Really close. So he was aged 4. Bless him. Michael's disappearance became one of the largest police investigations in Canadian history, and to this day, over 11,000 tips have been received by the police. The case was a major story for many years and was reported across Canada and the United States. However, despite a large number of tips and a Canadian $100,000 reward, the police still do not have any solid leads in the case. Yeah, Kiwi, fast, eh? On March 24, 1991, Michael and his family went to Blanchard Elementary School for his mum, Crystal's flag football practice. Michael was wearing a blue hooded jacket, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt, rugby pants, and blue sneakers that day. The family arrived at the school around 12:30 p.m. and when they got there, Michael asked his mum if he could go to the playground, which was near the field where the football practice was taking place. Despite having a gut feeling that something wasn't quite right, Crystal had allowed him to walk to the playground by himself, but told him that once he got there, he had to stay there and wait for Daddy to come. Never, ever go past your gut instinct if you're a mama. If you've got a gut instinct, follow it if you're a mama, especially with a little baby like that. However, when Michael's dad, Bruce, came to the playground, Michael was not there. Around 50 people began to look for Michael, and his parents immediately notified police. Investigation. Initial search efforts. At that time, the investigation regarding Michael's disappearance became one of the largest in Canadian history and still remains one of the largest today. Since Michael disappeared so quickly from a public place, the police quickly classified his case as an abduction rather than a missing child case. Is there a difference between abducted and missing child? I guess missing child could have run away. Yeah. Semantics in my eyes. and all the detectives from the Victoria Police Department were called in to solve the case. Hundreds of tips began coming in every hour from across British Columbia and North America, and during that time had to be written on carbon paper and sorted out manually. The police believed that if they had current technology such as video surveillance, DNA techniques, and a computer system to sort out tips, the case might have been solved. I kind of wonder how investigations were solved back in the day, because it's like they were working back in the dark ages with no DNA, no computers. You wondered how they ever solved anything at all. Phoebe says they looked for him for 3 years. That she lived there. Had your older son the year before. Kidnapping, you reckon? I think the difference is if they have evidence that they were abducted. In America, it's the difference between an Amber Alert and no Amber Alert. Oh, okay, interesting. Victoria detectives investigated known sex offenders and interviewed anyone who had been in the area around the time of Michael's disappearance, but were unable to find much information except a witness report that a man in his late 40s or early 50s with a brown van was near the playground. A month after Michael disappeared, the police staged a reenactment of his disappearance at Blanchard Elementary using a brown van, but were unable to produce any new leads. Reported sightings. In 2006, reports of a young man who physically resembled Michael and was living in the interior of British Columbia since 1990 breathed new life into the case. However, the man was confirmed by DNA testing not to be Michael. In early 2009, police in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, found a missing persons poster of Michael at the home of Vernon Seitz, 62, who confessed to his psychiatrist that he murdered a child in 1959 when he was 12 and knew of another child killing. Seitz was later found dead by Milwaukee police, apparently from natural causes. So, of course, that whatever information he actually may have had goes with him. And there is always a van. In 2011, with the 20th anniversary of Michael's disappearance approaching, the police were notified of a man living in Chase, British Columbia, who looked like Michael, but DNA testing later confirmed that he was not Michael. In 2013, a man with the username Canuckles posted on the message boards of the Vancouver Canucks official website claiming that the police were coming for a DNA test. They requested a blood sample from a man in Surrey, British Columbia, who they believed could possibly be Michael. However, on September 9th, the Victoria Police Department stated that the Surrey man was not Michael after DNA testing was done. In 2020, a TikToker by the name of Shanger Danger reportedly found the shirt Michael was said to be wearing at the time of his disappearance. The rare Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt was found submerged underwater, but after Michael's family reached out to the TikToker, they saw the t-shirt and realized it was not the exact same shirt he was wearing during his disappearance, because that would have been real odd all those years later. Later developments. As of 2021, Michael's case remains open, with both the police and Michael's family remaining hopeful for an ultimate resolution. In 2021, the Victoria Police Department released an age-enhanced sketch of Michael and launched an online tip portal, with Police Constable Cam McIntyre stating that over 10,000 tips have been received since 1991. And we'll just see, oh, here he is. Bless him. A big photo of him there. Oh, that's awful. It just goes on and on, doesn't it? Yeah, the white van with the tinted windows. They say to teach your child to scream if they get snatched. If that is if the abductor doesn't put the hand over the child's mouth, and then they can't scream. Hang on, I've got to let the cat in. Hello, Ronnie. At the park, they found rotten clothes that looked like Michael's 2 years ago. Oh, that's a bit freaky. Just 2 years ago. Goodness me. All right, guys. He'll probably come up here in a minute when he's finished having a feed. He likes to pop in and say hello. I'm going to put my very, very first ever video. Hi, Will. Very first video I did, so you can laugh at me because of course I look ridiculous. They were upgrading the park. Oh wow. God, if I can find the first one, it's going to be so old school. It's only a half-hour one, so we can take a couple of stops. If you haven't seen it, trigger warning, it's not a very nice one with the details. Crimes never are. We are a community who want to bring awareness to missing persons and unsolved murders, mainly in New Zealand, but some stories from around the world as well. Sorry about my audio, but I don't have any flash equipment or anything. I'm just using my laptop. Hopefully, in time, I can upgrade and it will sound better. Links to our Facebook page and website are in the description box below. My 1 second Odin is demanding. Oh, got you. Don't worry. That's where you'll also find my email and links to all my sources that I've used for this. I'm a one-woman operation, so if you'd like to support the channel, it would be greatly appreciated. And links to that are also in the description box. Any help is fantastic. If you like the content, remember to click the subscribe button, and when it pops up, choose. Sorry, I can't talk over the videos. Well, I'm glad you subbed, and I'm glad you're here. Question: do they still have neighbourhood watch safe houses over there? When I grew up there, we had safe houses with signs on letterboxes. No, I think the closest we have here would be Women's Refuge. Women's Refuge have safe houses, and that's for any woman suffering violence, especially domestic violence. Well done. Welcome, I should say, Joshi. All, so you'll be notified when there's another episode being released, and share and like. That would be nice as well. Okay, quickly, I just want to say my disclaimer. I don't mean any disrespect or hurt genuinely to anyone, to any family members or people that have been involved in these cases. It's all just information that I've found online, and I'm putting it all together into one video. My aim is to raise awareness to those cases. I don't want the victims' stories to be forgotten. They deserve to be heard, and that's what I want to do. A lot of these stories just need to be seen by the right person or the right people. And I'm hoping that if we share everywhere, that the right people will see and speak up finally, and maybe provide some answers for families that are in grief and hurting. All right, let's get into it. On April the 28th, 1998, Claire Hills, a 30-year-old woman known as Lisa, was discovered in the back seat of her black Mazda hatchback in an isolated Mangadade car park. She had been tied up, doused with petrol, and burnt alive. This truly is one of the
most horrific stories that I've had to research and cover. And I suggest if you're squeamish, yeah, it might not be the one for you. It's truly horrible. First, want to give you a bit of a description of where she was found. Mangaree Mountain in Mangaree Domain is one of the largest volcanic cones in the Auckland volcanic field, obviously in New Zealand. It's with a peak of 106 metres, which is 348 feet above sea level. It was the site of a major pa, which is a Maori fortified settlement, and many of the pa's earthworks are still obvious. It has extensive panoramic views of Auckland from its location in the suburb of Mangaree. It is also known as Te Pane o Mataho. Claire Elizabeth Hills was born in England and emigrated to Australia with her parents and siblings when she was just 2 years old. The family lived in a hostel for around 5 months before buying a house in Wollongong, where they settled. And Wollongong, hopefully I'm saying that right, I'm not massacring it, is a coastal city of Sydney. Claire had 5 siblings and she was the third child in the family. When Claire was 15, she took off from the family home with her boyfriend, a young man her father did not approve of. And haven't we heard that story a lot, even in true crime? Claire spent time working on fishing boats in Melbourne before she took off again, this time to Auckland, New Zealand. She used a fake passport under the name Lisa, and she went on to use that name in life after that. So we're going to use the name Lisa, but bear in mind some of the articles and interviews that are coming up are going to refer to her as Claire. So Lisa, Claire, same person. At the age of 21, Lisa became a Jehovah's Witness and later went on to marry a man named Peter. And Lisa went on to work various jobs throughout the years. Around 18 months before she died, Lisa's marriage to Peter broke down. She moved into a small flat of her own in Herne Bay. Wikipedia describes Herne Bay as an affluent suburb of Auckland, New Zealand. It is located on the southwestern shore of the Waitemata Harbour to the west of the Auckland Harbour Bridge. Now, I've got the map on the screen. I myself live in the South Island and I've never been to the North Island and never been to Auckland. So I wouldn't have a clue where anything is, but hopefully that map helps you a little bit. Lisa's sisters, Linda Hinson and Alison Harris, spoke to reporters. They said that Lisa had been estranged from the family, but eventually reconciled with them. They said she seemed to have a happy life in New Zealand and she quite liked it. She didn't think she would ever return to Australia, and she had really settled in New Zealand. Lisa was working for McDonald's as a manager, and only a week before she was murdered, she moved to the branch at the Auckland airport. She was the manager of the day shift, which started at 3:30 a.m. So for Lisa, her routine would usually be to set her alarm for 2:30 a.m., shower, dress, and then drive her black Mazda Familia hatchback 28 kilometres to the airport. And if we look at that map before, you can see from Herne Bay to the airport, the Auckland airport there, and it's about half an hour, so 28 k's, not too bad. At 6:30, actually before that, the day that Lisa was killed, she was going back to work after 2 rostered days off. Then at 6:31 a.m. on the 28th of April, firefighters responded to a car fire at Mangaree Mountain. Their response was initially delayed by a police officer who took the initial 111 call and he failed to action it. But when fire crews did get there, they managed to put out the fire in just over 5 minutes. When a senior fire officer approached the car, he could make out a charred body in the back seat. Police were called and they launched a homicide investigation. Lisa was identified as the victim through dental records, and police found her McDonald's staff name tag, which had survived the fire, in the back of her car. From then on, the investigation was called Operation Hills. A post-mortem was performed on Lisa's body. It revealed that Lisa was alive when her car was set on fire, but most probably, hopefully, she was unconscious. The pathologist found that her lungs were heat damaged and full of soot. She had numerous fractures to her skull and the bones around her throat. The pathologist was unable to determine if these injuries were caused by the fire or as a result of an earlier assault. There was also evidence that Lisa had been sexually assaulted. Lisa's official cause of death was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning. Police appealed to the public for any sightings of Lisa's black Mazda Familia between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. that morning. They revealed also that the fuel used to ignite the fire must have been sourced by the killer. There had been nothing around the car that was found that could have been used to set the vehicle on fire. That means that the killer probably had to have gone to a service station to buy fuel in like a container or stolen it. Police also revealed that Lisa had a steering wheel lock she used regularly to secure her car, and that was missing. So police believed the killer took it, and if they found the steering wheel lock, they would find the killer. But that was never found. We'll talk about a couple of witnesses. There was a woman who had witnessed the incident, and she spoke publicly for the first time in an article for the Herald on Sunday. The links are below. She said, "I won't forget it. I was going to the mountain at about 5:45 a.m. and as I got closer, I saw a man moving around a car at the soccer club. The next thing I saw, the thing go up in flames. I just stood there and watched it. It was like an inferno." She goes, "I remember as I stood there thinking, if someone was in that car, there'd be no way anyone could get near it to help them. The whole thing was engulfed in flames like a furnace." She goes on to say, "The person ran away. He didn't know I was there. He ran straight towards me. Then he realised I was there. He just stopped and we eyeballed each other for a minute. Then he turned and ran back the same way he had come." She said, "He definitely got a fright to see me." The woman went to a nearby property and asked a man there to ring 111. The woman said that later that day, about 3 p.m, that man called her at work to tell her that there had been a body in that car. She said, "When he told me that, I felt sick. It wasn't nice. I tried to keep the vision of that man in my mind just in case." I don't know how this poor woman stayed at work that day with that on her mind. That's awful. And I'd say she's going to remember this for the rest of her life. That's so tragic. Absolutely horrible. There were 3 other people reported that see a man of similar description not long after Lisa's car was in flames. There was a jogger at the Domain that saw the man run away. There was a taxi driver on the motorway, and he said a man ran out in front of his car. And another motorist saw a man walking towards the Mangere Bridge shops. The descriptions from the witnesses helped police to create a sketch of the killer. Mr. Muaulu, who was 18 at the time, was the duty manager at McDonald's the night before Lisa's murder, and he spoke to the Herald on Sunday. Now, for this part, I'm going to just call him Mr. M because I'm going to just crucify that name, and I don't want to cause any disrespect to anyone by saying it improperly. So Mr. M said that he had called Lisa the night before to discuss stock. He said, "I called her about 9:45 p.m. I forgot that she was supposed to be starting work at 3:30 a.m. I needed permission to give this other store our stock. We had a quick conversation and that was it. Everything seemed normal." He says, "I knew her as Lisa. She wasn't there long," meaning at the airport branch, "before the incident happened. I remember that day very clearly." Mr. M was woken up at 3:30 a.m. on that morning of the 28th of April by a phone call. He says it was the store calling to say that Lisa hadn't shown up for work. I was getting in trouble because they thought that she must have called in sick and that I'd forgotten to leave a message. Poor bugger. Later that morning, the cops arrived at my house, he said. They had found Lisa's car burned out at Mangere Mountain. They were trying to find out what conversation I'd had with her the night before. Police updated Mr. M during the day. First, they told him that they had found something of interest in the burnt-out car. Then later, they confirmed that the something of interest was Lisa's body. Mr. M says, I was really upset. I just couldn't believe it. That poor boy was only 18, and I guarantee that he spent his life remembering this. That's just awful. There have been suspects named over the years, and many have been investigated. Lisa's estranged husband, Peter, was looked at, obviously. The husband or ex-husband, boyfriend, whatever, always getting looked at. Police also looked at a recidivist rapist called William Mokaraka. Mokaraka was known to attack women in their homes in South Auckland while brandishing a knife around that time. Despite a lack of evidence, police initially believed that rapist William Mokaraka was responsible for her death and shelved the case for nearly 10 years in the hope that Mokaraka would confess. Now, I know that sounds awful, but we're thinking 1998. I don't know. DNA was probably in its infancy, even if it was around. I don't even know when it was in. Can't remember. So I suppose if it's kind of hard for them to do much investigating with no DNA to be done. But anyway, years later, after a DNA profile created with new technology in 2007, both men were eliminated as suspects when their DNA failed to match a sample taken from Lisa's body, and that was believed to belong to the killer. Lisa's mum said after, when we found out it wasn't him, we felt annoyed and let down. We were back where we started and that it hadn't been solved. It alarms me that someone's got away with murder. That's a great injustice. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. I agree with her. After a meeting with the New Zealand police, the family now believe the killer will not be found as too much time has passed and they believe too many errors were made early in the investigation. Although they hold no malice against the detectives, her mum in particular feels the focus on Mokaraka, Lisa's involvement with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the use of her Christian name may have hindered the investigation. She said, people thought William Mokaraka killed a girl called Claire, but people didn't know her as Claire, except if they read the newspaper or watched TV. They knew her as Lisa, she said. Her family's growing pessimism comes as police revealed the DNA profile developed from the crime scene has made no match with their criminal database, which holds 123,000 profiles. At the time, the officer in charge of the case, Detective Senior Sergeant Dave Lynch, said the task now was to go back through the file and hopefully unearth new suspects. There were 2 rewards posted for Lisa's death. The first one was about 4 months after. At the time, it was one of the biggest ever offered in New Zealand, but it produced nothing significant. A second $50,000 reward was posted in 2009. It read, a reward of $50,000 will be paid for material, information or evidence which leads to the conviction of any person or persons responsible for the murder of Claire Hills. The Commissioner of Police will determine the amount of the reward and will apportion it if there is more than one claimant. An immunity against prosecution will be considered for any accomplice not being the principal offender who shall first give such information or evidence. This offer shall remain in force until October 1st, 2009. After that, police said they got around 70 calls, but again, it failed to produce any information. At that time, back then, this was one of New Zealand's most barbaric cases. And even more disturbing was that police believed Lisa had been held for several hours before she was burned alive. They suspect she was abducted from her vehicle as she drove to the McDonald's airport restaurant from her home in Herne Bay about 3 a.m. The officer in charge of the case, Detective Senior Sergeant Dave Lynch, said at the time, although the reward produced nothing significant, there was still a lot of work for the inquiry team to finish. Mr. Lynch said, although the reward had formally expired, if anyone had significant information, a payout could be negotiated. He said there would certainly be an opportunity for someone who was financially motivated to collect it in the future. Miss Hills had nothing bad or criminal in her past, and Mr. Lynch said her family deserved the peace and comfort they would get by solving the crime. Any accomplice offering information would not be prosecuted, providing he or she was not the principal offender. You know, I would have thought if with the offer of immunity, or even before that, the reward, you think someone would have come forward for that, but obviously no one did. In June 2000, it was revealed that police had told Lisa's family that they knew who killed her, but did not have enough evidence for an arrest. Lois Green, Lisa's mum, who lives south of Sydney, said she thought of her daughter every day. She had taken hope from the frank letter from the officer in charge of the inquiry at this time, Detective Senior Sergeant Dale Candy of Otahuhu, who had taken a fresh look at the case. Lois said, I know it sounds a bit weird, but it is some consolation that they know who has done it and can keep their eye on them. They're just waiting for a slip-up or some more evidence to come in. In the letter, Detective Senior Sergeant Candy said a team of experienced detectives had reviewed every facet of the investigation to establish its competency. In all of the inquiries completed to date by the homicide team and the review team, she said, I am confident that the inquiry has unravelled our offender. Unfortunately, evidentially, we are a long way removed from being able to A, become focused solely on that offender, or B, constructively calling the offender to account for the actions. The restrictions unfortunately faced by staff on this inquiry rate amongst the highest on any homicide experienced in New Zealand. She told the New Zealand Herald that the letter was meant for the family as a message of hope. Candy stated, after a year's investigation, we have a good understanding or suspicion of what has occurred, but we are clearly not in a position to lay a charge, otherwise we would, she said. She goes on, Detective Senior Sergeant Candy said she believed the killer was a stranger to Claire, that he had some link to the Mangere area and that others may have been involved in the initial abduction. She believed it was an opportunistic crime and her biggest fear was that the killer or killers would strike again. One of Lisa's close friends at the time said she suspected Lisa had been abducted either as she arrived at the airport or possibly after being flagged down by the offender, pretending to be a stranded motorist. I have problems with this letter. I've never heard of such a letter. It's really good that the family took it as hope or, a good thing. It was a good thing for them. But I don't understand. It makes me really uncomfortable. If they know the killer, they know who it is, they've got DNA, why can't they get DNA of the killer to match it? I don't know if I've watched too much telly, but on TV they can follow him and get DNA from a smoke bud or a coffee cup or go through his rubbish or something. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me. It's just something weird about it. But the important thing is it made the family feel better. So that is definitely the most important thing. In April 2018, an article was published by the Herald on Sunday. In this article, Detective Superintendent Dave Lynch, who originally worked on the case in 1998, spoke with a reporter, Annalise. When Lynch was asked about the DNA they had, he wouldn't disclose more about the sample, saying, "It's something only police and the offender know about." He wants to keep that card close to his chest, along with a couple of other aspects of the investigation. But everything else the police knew about the murder had been shared publicly numerous times in a bid to flush out the person responsible. Detective Lynch said, "From the time Claire got up around 2:30 a.m. to when her car caught fire up at the mountain, those 2 to 3 hours are an unknown for us. And the key to advancing the investigation is to fill in that window of time." He said that signing by the witness, the woman, is the only solid piece of information we have around who is directly connected with Claire's murder. He says there's a range of scenarios. One is that Claire was known to the killer, and the other was that she was the subject of a random attack. And how that attack occurred and where is obviously very much a focus of the investigation. He says, "I'm still convinced there's a person or small group out there that know or have some very strong suspicions around what happened. I always hold out hope that one day someone will pick up that phone." He goes on, "We don't need much. All we need is names. We do have the DNA profile to work with, and we are able to give assurance of confidentiality around information people are prepared to give us. That DNA profile has failed to match anyone in the New Zealand database, and that's made of people who have given samples after being arrested for criminal offending." Does this mean to me, so has the guy just never got in trouble ever again? I don't know. I watch a lot of true crime, and I'm sure you guys do too, and usually they don't just stick to one thing, they do more. But he's never been arrested?
So what I think, exactly that. If they are saying that they've got his DNA from, do you don't attack me. I'm trying to do something important. Does that mean to say that they've got the DNA, but it's never been matched against anyone in New Zealand who has had their DNA taken for Ancestry.com? I don't know if that exists, but here, but has never been arrested for anything else. This was the only crime they've ever done, ever, in New Zealand that could possibly have that DNA, and that's why it hasn't been matched. It means there is hope for the future, I guess, that the DNA can be found. And then, like I say, that they reckon that they knew the person who did it. In one breath, they're saying they think they know who did it. Well, then why don't you chase them around like on TV and get a coffee cup or spit or chewing gum or something? But then one breath they say that, it might have been someone she knew, but it might have been just a random attack on the way to work. So actually, I don't think they know shit. And then what sort of DNA is it? Is it strong DNA? Is it, do they only have a minuscule amount of DNA and that's why they can't waste it on trying or testing it on lots of different people? I don't know. There's just a whole lot of strangeness that goes with this case that I'm not understanding so much. But of course, being New Zealand, there is not always a lot of information out there. We're only limited to 1 or 2 news outlets where we can get the information from. So, it's tough. But that is one of the cases that will stick with me because it was the first one that I covered. And such a gruesome one, and one that I really hope gets answered or solved. Right, my friends, Toshi, welcome I know you're new. I'm so glad you subbed, and I hope you'll be back. I've got, guys, my next live stream already booked for tomorrow morning, 10:30 in the morning if you're a Kiwi. God knows what other time that is in your fellows' land. But Toshi, hope you can make it. And we'll go over a couple more of the videos I've done and have a bit of discussion. And I'm going to go to bed and take this grumpy cat with me. He just bit me before, man, because I got in his way. It's really naughty, Ronnie. I don't like it. Don't like it at all. He doesn't really care. All right, guys. I love yous so much. I will see you in the morning if you can catch me, Dev and Toshi. I don't know where you are, if you're still overseas. And Pam, get to bed. And Phoebe, all of yous from the US of A, get to bed. You ever spoiled 21-pound cat? He's a spoiled cat. And he knows he's extra cute and that he gets away with everything because I love him. All right, Dev, Pam, Kiwi, Phoebe, Toshi, everybody. See you tomorrow. Bye, guys.